Congressman Ken Buck from the Fort Collins Greeley area, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's the district you've been representing over the years. It's good to see you, and I know you got to go vote. So let me ask you about this issue here on voting on a bill that has no chance of passing and becoming law. Why do it?
Well, I'll tell you why I feel so strongly about it. One of our pregnancy resource centers in Longmont, which is was in the district, recently drawn out of the district, but was burned down last year after the Dobbs decision. We need to make sure that we condemn political violence on every side. We need to protect pregnancy resource centers. We need to protect abortion clinics. We can't allow violence to be injected into the policy debate. And so I feel really strongly that the bill concerning protecting all issues, all sides of the abortion issue is considered.
I understand that. How about on the specific issue of abortion itself? Why vote on that bill?
On protecting pregnancy resource centers as well as abortion clinics?
No, I mean, in general, why bring this up now if you don't think it can pass?
Well, I don't know that it can't pass, and I think the senators will be able to talk about it when it gets over there. They take a lot of naps. They do a lot of other things that we don't do on the House side. We'll pass a lot more bills on the House side. But this isn't the abortion issue isn't what is the central piece of this. The central piece of this is protecting those who are involved in providing medical services to pregnant women.
Do you think there needs to be a federal legislation on deciding when abortion is legal or not?
No, I think that should be up to the state legislatures to decide when abortion is legal or not, and I think that's what the Supreme Court said.
And are you comfortable with that? State of Colorado clearly is a state that is, on social issues, pretty libertarian. Not necessarily on all fiscal issues, but on social issues, pretty libertarian. Are you comfortable with where the state's law is?
Well, I'm not comfortable with where the state law is. I'm a pro-life candidate and a pro-life congressperson, and so I think that Colorado has gone too far. But I do think that Colorado has made that decision. The Colorado voters have elected a Democrat House, a Democrat Senate, and a Democrat governor, and they have made the decision to be one of the most liberal on abortion in the country.
And you don't think Congress should essentially overrule that decision by Colorado voters?
No, I don't think that at all. I think the Supreme Court was absolutely right. This is a decision that has been left to the states in the past and should be left to the states in the future.
Would you go so far as to vote against any attempt that did try to codify abortion federally, no matter what the number of weeks was?
If it's just a strictly weak issue, yes. I think there are issues like born alive, where we have to make sure we are protecting human life after birth. But I think if it is just an issue that's dealing with the number of weeks before an abortion can occur, absolutely, I think that should be left up to the states.
And where are you on so-called personhood? Is that something basically giving constitutional rights to a fetus?
Yeah, again, I think that is a state issue. It's not a federal issue, and it shouldn't be an issue that Congress takes up. I do feel very strongly personally about that, but it's not something that Congress should be legislating on.
What do you say to Nancy Mace and a few other of your colleagues who are worried that this politically is just going to make the party look out of touch?
You know, I think that Republicans have been identified with a pro-life brand, and I think that a lot of the candidates who lost recently blamed abortion. I think a lot of politics is local, and I wouldn't blame that national issue, but Nancy knows her district much better than I do.
It's intriguing to me. I want to ask you about some tech issues because you've been at the forefront of this. And I think if there are some bipartisan things to be done, it's in this area of antitrust and tech. You boycott Google. Can you explain why you do? And then I want to ask you about some antitrust legislation.
Yeah, I boycott a lot of products that I don't believe are morally correct, and Google is one of those products. I think there's a lot of alternatives to Google. I think what they do is they suppress speech. I have witnessed it on the conservative side. I have no doubt that they suppress speech on the liberal side also. I think that they are a monopoly that is acting to try to crush the competition in the marketplace.
What would a law look like that could demonopolize Google?
So Google controls the buy side of online ads, the sell side of online ads, and they bought ad tech, the company that decides that. And so they control the whole spectrum. I think what they should be allowed to do is be involved in one of the three sides, but not all three.
So this is a case where you believe you'd like to see the federal government break Google up. This is is this similar? I mean, you and I are of a certain age. We remember when AT&T got broken up because they were a monopoly. And essentially it was the government that said, you can't control all of it. Not long distance, not local, not the actual phone itself. Is that what we're looking at here?
Well, I think in some areas, breaking up Google, breaking up Facebook and Instagram, breaking up some of those companies makes sense. The actual search engine itself, I think we just need to make sure that we don't allow them to discriminate, and so that competition can be created, particularly on the search engine side.
Let me ask you this. Do you think you need legislation, or should this be something the FTC can already do?
I think the FTC can do it if the courts would interpret the consumer welfare standard in a slightly different way. We have a new e-commerce and social media economy, and the courts have really been interpreting the consumer welfare standard as it applies to the old economy. So I think the courts are hearing what we're saying in Congress, hearing what the public is saying. It's time for a new consumer welfare standard, but Congress, under Article 1, should be legislating, not the courts, and we should take that action.
Congressman Buck, I got to let you go for vote. I really want to delve more into tech. I look forward to doing that with you down the road.
Thanks for coming on. I look forward to it, too.
You got it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.